You may have heard me mention that I'm a bit fed up with Norse mythology. It's gotten worse than the zombie genre. Everywhere you turn, it's Thor this, Loki that, etc. There's so many interesting regions all over the world with unique myths and legends, yet for some reason, we seem to be stuck on the Nordic ones. With that in mind, you can probably see why I was not too excited about playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This is also why I ended up playing it so late. The reason why I'm telling you this is because I want you to get a feeling for my starting point. I was interested but not excited to play the game. After nearly 80 hours, I'm now ready to tell you why this is the best Assassin's Creed game so far. But first, let's talk Ultrawide Support. Valhalla supports both 21:9 and 32:9 natively. It also has HDR support, although the effect is relatively minor. So let's start by addressing the game's visuals and sound. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is gorgeous to look at. This does not come cheap though. Cranking everything to the max did bring my 1080 to its knees, especially when it came to large battles while in snowy terrain. My frame rate would sometimes drop below 40 FPS. When it comes to the sound, the game's soundtrack is awesome and rivaled only by its fantastic voice acting. My only negative observation here is that there were discrepancies when it came to pronunciation of names. Sometimes one character would pronounce a name one way and then another character would pronounce it differently. But that's really the only thing I can criticize when it comes to the voice acting. Even the random NPCs and the children all sounded great. When you start the game, you have the option of setting your character's sex. We can either play as a male or female Viking. It would seem that, as in the previous game, the female character is the canonically correct one here as well. This first occurred to me when the NPCs would sometimes talk about me with a female pronoun. I mean, I know it's 2021, but my protagonist sports a long beard, so obviously some of the NPC voice lines simply were only recorded with the female version in mind. Not to mention that I googled it and apparently the name Eivor is actually a female name. This was particularly surprising since it also happened during cutscenes that I would hear some NPC address me with a female pronoun. The second clue which solidified this theory for me was that our character's family name appears in several in-game documents. The name is Eivor Varinsdottir. It would appear that the last names back then indicated if you are someone's son or daughter. Varinsdottir would mean the daughter of Varin, as you can probably hear it. For example, when you meet the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, their last names are always Ragnarsson, meaning son of Ragnar. So yeah, my character is the daughter of Varin. This is a minor oversight and nothing critical. The real reason why I'm addressing this is because there is a third option when selecting your character's gender, and that's the possibility to let the Animus decide for you. In this case, you will play as female Eivor for the most part and only switch to the male one for a few sections of the game. In my case, I chose to play with the male one for the whole game and don't regret my choice. But, as a consequence of that choice, some story moments will make less sense if played this way. Although, to be fair, the deeper story is already complicated and will likely not be understood by most players unless they read additional information or watch some YouTube video explaining it all in detail. It's what I did at least. It involves part of the previous games and it's not likely that most people remember anything really about those games when it comes to their deeper story. I know I didn't. And speaking of the story, it's excellent, but what really struck me was how well it was delivered. Unlike Odyssey, this time around the story is darker and more serious. It also feels like the battle between the Assassins and the Templars is in the background and we're more focused at making alliances and claiming parts of England for our tribe. Make no mistake though, this will change later on. When I was playing the previous game, it felt a lot like playing a fairy tale. The protagonist from that game, Alexios, was even fighting mythical creatures. Now don't get me wrong, I actually had a lot of fun with that, but Valhalla feels more grounded in reality. Playing it is almost like experiencing historical events rather than fiction. This helps take the game and its darker tone more seriously. In addition to that, the gameplay has been improved in pretty much every way as well. First of all, the battles are brutal. The executions you perform are so awesome that I was mostly finding them enjoyable even after 80 hours of playtime. The combat system appears less complex at first since the whole leveling process has been modified substantially. When you do level up, you get to distribute 2 skill points into a vast tree of mostly passive stat boosts. I found that my progression was balanced so much better than in the previous game. I remember how in Odyssey it was nearly impossible to kill enemies which were a few levels higher than you. They would basically kill you in one hit, while you would have to hit them 100 times in order to take them down. This is no longer the case. Yes, stronger enemies will kill you much faster, but they will not be nearly unkillable as it was before. This means that a player who is careful could still fight them and have a good chance of winning without having to actually spend an hour fighting a single enemy. You can also unlock special skills by finding hidden books all over the map. Personally, I did not like that aspect of the game much, since it feels like you have to explore for the sake of character development. These skills are not critically important, but they make the combat more interesting. The same applies to gear, by the way. Instead of dropping tons of useless junk and having to break or sell it, you now find gear by mostly exploring the map and searching for treasures. This was a major complaint of mine in the past, so seeing a quality over quantity approach here made me very happy. You can upgrade the gear with materials which are also found all over the place, and even insert gems into its sockets. With each upgrade, the item also starts to look better. And since there are no actual levels, I know I did mention that you do level up, but there's no number in terms of levels, so your items are always relevant. If you find a sword at the start of the game, you can play throughout the whole game without needing to do anything but upgrade it in order to increase its damage. But it will not have to scale with you because you do not increase in terms of level. Just a special stat called power, which increases as you just give yourself more and more of these points in the skill tree. If you have watched my review of Odyssey, you will probably have memories of me complaining about the fact that the game was less and less an Assassin's Creed game and more something else. This time Ubisoft have addressed the issue. Not only can you specialize in your Assassination branch of the skill tree, but you also have the option to define the stealth difficulty separately. This determines how quickly the guards will see you and will enable you to play the game stealthily even if you are not too good at it. This time around, assassinations will kill any non-elite enemies instantly, and there is a skill which allows you to execute elite enemies as well, provided you pass the quick time event which the game throws at you during the execution. If that seems annoying to you, however, we now have a special setting called Guaranteed Assassination, which when turned on will allow you to kill anyone in one hit from stealth. I decided not to use it since it was something I hadn't noticed, and then when I did realize it was there, I was 60 hours into the game and already had absolutely no problems with the QuickTime event for the assassination of elite enemies. In any case, it is really appreciated that they have returned to form, however, it wasn't enough for me. The problem here is that Eivor simply doesn't have enough tools at his disposal when it comes to playing stealthily. I missed the double and triple assassinations, for example. Now if you want to kill 3 enemies, you would have to assassinate one of them and then shoot the other 2 with the bow. This is perfectly serviceable, but it doesn't feel as badass as some of Ezio's moves. But then again, Eivor is a much better fighter when it comes to open conflict, so I guess it does balance things out. Valhalla also handles quests differently. You no longer get a ton of side quests which clog your quest log. Instead, these quests are indicated on the map. The thing about them is that they are a lot more casual than the main ones and usually only take a few short minutes to complete. They offer a variety of something to do in between your more serious tasks, like this guy for example who has an axe stuck in his head. All in all, Valhalla now feels and plays a lot like a Witcher game in some aspects, and that's no small feat. I also like the fact that the Raven's use has been reduced significantly. Honestly, it was annoying to have to scan the whole area before actually approaching it. While this never was really a necessity, it gave the player a huge advantage, and who wouldn't like that? So we were always stuck scanning with the bird before entering the fray. Now its only use is to give us general outlining information about the area we need to investigate for some quest. That is all. In addition to that, we now have a charisma stat, which we can improve by playing a minigame in which we have to counter insults. It reminds me a bit of the old Monkey Island insult fencing. The best part is that increasing our charisma can help us with some quests, where we get additional options if our stat is high enough. I would love to see this expanded upon, so that next time more stats are taken into consideration. We do have multiple types of stats on the stat tree already, so it would be awesome if they could, for example, provide us with more dialogue options based on our combat or sneak skill, similarly to how it is in the Fallout games. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, we will also get to upgrade our village, which will reward us with new side quests and buffs. Just like with weapon upgrades, we can acquire materials for that by exploring the vast open world or by initiating raids. Oh yeah, before I forget it, I also love the fact that the sea battles are gone. In addition to that, our Viking companions can not only sing songs, but will also tell us stories while we are traveling by boat. This is especially interesting since you can hire some Vikings which you will meet as part of the main quests, and they bring their own set of interesting stories. As for the raids, they're only second to the castle sieges when it comes to presentation. All in all, the battles in the game are epic enough and a lot of fun. My main complaint is that the game still punishes you for killing innocent civilians, even during raids. Clearly the guys at Ubisoft haven't informed themselves on the proper protocol when it comes to Viking raids. Obviously being able to rape is too much to ask for in an Assassin's Creed game, but killing anything that moves is pretty much good Viking etiquette during a raid. Sadly, as soon as you happen to strike someone down, the game gives you a warning. Do a few more and it's game over. And speaking of game overs, the game did crash a few times on me. Not too many, but I'd say about once every 10 hours of playtime. Luckily the checkpoint system is really good and I never lost more than a few minutes. The story will also take place in both modern times and the past. The modern story is kept to a minimum and mostly bland. The biggest problem there is that it spans throughout all the Assassin's Creed games and is connected, meaning that the player has to watch some kind of video online or read about it in order to be able to connect the dots. Something that I mentioned earlier in the review. As for the past, Eivor's adventures will also involve visions of the gods and their kingdom. There's a whole section of the game dedicated to that part, and it's both visually as well as narratively impressive. For those people who are riding the whole Viking mythology wave hard at the moment, this will be a fan service of monumental scale. Even I, who am fed up with it all, managed to enjoy that section greatly. This is how Valhalla adds the magical aspects of the story without creating the fairy tale feeling I mentioned earlier. In addition to that, you can find some mushrooms which will give you even more curious visions. Obviously these are more side quests and something you find along the way as you travel the map, but they're fun and very interesting to experience. I personally always enjoy some kind of crazy psychedelic nightmarish experiences in games. And last but not least, the animus will also create anomalies throughout the world, which will put your parkour skills to the test. And should you still manage to get bored of it all, you can even try to find some legendary animals out in the world, which will offer you an additional hunting challenge, since hunting is a big part of the game if you want to get some of the materials. Naturally, we get to kill some Templars as well, although their order has a different name in this game. What I found particularly cool was the animation which is played when you stab the members of the order with your hidden blade. You get this cinematic view from the inside as the blade penetrates their bodies, fractures the bones, and ultimately seals their fate. In addition to that, the animation changes depending on the location of entry. For example, a stab to the head shows you how the blade pierces the skull and the brain. There's another part of the story which I have to praise here. There will be times when Eivor is tasked with figuring out something and advising a person of power. For example, helping a king decide who has betrayed him. You can investigate, but the investigations actually follow real life logic. This means that we don't really know for sure at the end of the day. All we can do is assess the facts and try to make the best choice. What I found particularly powerful here is that the game doesn't really tell us if that choice was correct or not. You accuse someone, they usually die, things move on. You are left hoping that you did the right thing. In most games, there's usually a big revelation at the end of the quest. For example, the accused admits they did it and even gives us some kind of motive for their actions. In Valhalla, that is almost never the case. A similar logic is applied to lying. My experience with other games, not necessarily Assassin's Creed ones, has been that doing something bad and then lying to cover it up usually leads to you being discovered at some point. The game tends to punish the player for bad behavior, even if that behavior would realistically be next to impossible to determine or recognize by the NPCs. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, if you lie about something that nobody except you can know, they will usually believe you because Eivor is a convincing liar, especially if the lie seems to fit the character, which often is the case. So if I do something bad and someone asks me, did you do this? And I say, absolutely not, you know me, I would never do that. They will believe me and then I will get a reward for that even. And there will be no consequence because nobody could ever know that I actually lied. As is tradition, we will get to interact with real and arguably fictional historical figures. The story is told so well that you will grow attached to some of them and your choices will definitely shape their fate. Valhalla's story has multiple endings. I played without reading any instructions and by role-playing as Eivor, who is honorable but still a savage Viking. I killed a lot of people when the game offered me to spare them, even if some of the characters would protest and advise against it. After all, the Vikings have a strict honor code. Breaking that code means you die. Eivor is Viking through and through, so I played the story in that way. Still, many of my choices were honorable as well, and I actually ended up getting the best ending. This to me is an indication that Ubisoft didn't just expect the player to roleplay as either a saint or a devil, but rather a mix of both. Or at the very least, they tolerated this approach, and to me that's good enough. The game gets bonus points for giving my protagonist the ability to not only pet dogs, but pet them properly. In conclusion, Assassin's Creed Valhalla expanded upon the open world aspects, clearly taking inspiration from games such as The Witcher 3 while still retaining its unique identity. Most problems of the previous games were addressed directly and fixed. There's literally nothing I can think of that I could compare to Odyssey and claim it was done better there. Valhalla is truly a major leap in the right direction. This is the pinnacle of the series and without a doubt in my mind, the best Assassin's Creed game so far. I can recommend this to pretty much anyone, but be warned, the game will easily take 70 to 80 hours to complete, and that's if you are not being a completionist. So plan accordingly because a great adventure awaits, one that you should definitely not miss. We've reached the end of the review. To whomever is still here, I would like to remind you to check out my Patreon page. I regularly post all the good free games I can find there, so give it a look from time to time and you will never miss out on the good freebies. With that having been said, I want to thank you for watching Game Filter. I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a great day.